I returned from the hospital, hoping for a warm welcome, but found that my in-laws had moved into my room. When I asked my daughter what had happened, she coldly pointed to the doghouse and said, "Now you'll live here." The betrayal hit me like a knife in the back, but I moved into my $1 million villa. A month later, she asked to stay with me. You won't believe what I did. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My trembling finger pressed each number slowly. The medication made everything harder. Buttons felt smaller, my hands less steady. 3 days since the surgery, and finally they were letting me go home. The small duffel bag sat beside me on the hospital bed, containing everything I'd brought: my cardigan, reading glasses, and the book I never finished. The phone rang once, twice. I adjusted my position, wincing at the pull of surgical tape. "Hello?" Adeline's voice came through sharp, distracted. "Adeline, honey, they're discharging me. Can you come pick me up?" My voice sounded smaller than I intended, weakened by days of breathing tubes and medication. A pause. Background noise. Cash registers beeping, customers talking. She was at work. "Dad, I'm busy right now. Find yourself a motel or something." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my lap, the dial tone buzzing like an angry wasp. My wedding ring slid loose around my finger. I'd lost weight these past weeks. The harsh fluorescent light above flickered, casting shadows that danced across the discharge papers. She's joking, right?" I spoke to the empty room, my voice echoing off sterile walls. A nurse walked past in the hallway, her shoes squeaking against polished linoleum. The smell of disinfectant burned my nostrils. I called the number again, but it went straight to voicemail. Her voice, bright and cheerful. "You've reached Adeline Thompson. Leave a message and I'll get right back to you." I hung up without speaking. My cardigan hung loose on my shoulders. 2 months ago, it fit perfectly. Now it draped like clothes on a scarecrow. I folded it carefully, the way my late wife Martha used to fold my work shirts. Adeline would explain later. She had to be overwhelmed with work, the kids, household responsibilities. Carl probably wasn't helping much. He never did. The business card for City Cab sat on my nightstand. I'd grabbed it from the lobby, just in case. My fingers shook as I dialed. "City Cab. I need a ride from Mercy General Hospital to Evanston. The address is 20 minutes, sir." I gathered my belongings slowly. Each movement sent small shocks through my chest, where they'd cracked open my ribs. The surgeon had explained everything, but the details blurred together, like watercolors in rain. What mattered was going home. To my family. To Tommy's baseball cards spread across the kitchen table and Lily's crayon drawings covering the refrigerator. The taxi would arrive soon. I sat back down, checking my watch. 4:30. Adeline would be finishing her shift by 6. We'd talk then, sort everything out. She'd probably laugh about the phone call, explain how crazy her day had been. My reflection caught in the window. A pale, thin man clutching a small bag. When had I gotten so old? The surgery had aged me years in days, but I was alive. That's what mattered. I was alive and going home to the people who needed me. A car horn honked outside. The taxi. I stood carefully, testing my balance. Everything felt fragile, like I might break if I moved too quickly. But I was stronger than I looked. I had to be. Time to go home. The taxi's worn leather seats creaked as I settled in, clutching my discharge bag. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. A pale man with too big clothes and careful movements. "Where to?" 1420 Oak Street, Evanston." The address rolled off my tongue like a prayer. I'd lived there 2 years now, ever since selling my place in Detroit, to help with their mortgage. Home was where family waited. The engine rumbled to life, and Chicago's winter landscape rolled past my window. Gray sky pressed down like a heavy blanket, streetlights already flickering on, though it wasn't yet dark. Christmas decorations still hung in some windows, tired tinsel and faded wreaths clinging to January's bitter cold. I checked my watch. 5:15. Traffic moved sluggishly along Lakeshore Drive, brake lights painting red streaks on wet pavement. The radio played soft jazz, something Martha used to hum while cooking dinner. My chest ached, and not just from the surgery. "Been in the hospital long?" the driver asked, eyes meeting mine in the mirror. 3 days. Heart surgery. The words came easier now. I'd practiced them with nurses, doctors, the chaplain who'd stopped by. My family's expecting me? He nodded, turning attention back to traffic. The heater blew warm air that smelled of coffee and air freshener. I pressed my face to the window, watching familiar neighborhoods pass. There, the park where I'd taught Tommy to throw a curveball. The ice cream shop where Lily always ordered strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. My breath fogged the glass. How many times had I ridden this route? Grocery runs, picking up the kids from school when Adeline worked late. Trips to the doctor when my heart started acting up. I knew every pothole, every stop sign. This was my world now, smaller than Detroit, but warmer, fuller. The phone call nagged at me like a splinter. Adeline had sounded so cold, not like herself at all. But she'd been carrying extra weight lately, with Carl's hours getting cut and both kids needing new everything for school. I'd tried to help, dipping into my savings more than I should have. What were savings for, if not family? Find yourself a motel. The words echoed in my memory. She couldn't have meant it. Not my Adeline, who used to curl up in my lap for bedtime stories, who called me every Sunday just to chat. Stress did strange things to people. I'd learned that after Martha died. Grief and pressure could make you say things you didn't mean. The taxi turned onto Oak Street, and my heart lifted despite the ache. Almost home. Almost to warm hugs and excited voices calling, "Grandpa's back." Tommy would want to show me his latest drawing. Something with dinosaurs, probably. Lily would insist on making me tea in her toy kitchen, the plastic cups that never quite fit adult hands. House numbers flicked past. 1410, 1412, 1416. There, 1420. The white colonial with blue shutters that I'd helped to paint last spring. The small front yard where we'd built a snowman at Christmas. The driveway where Carl parked his truck. But the driveway was empty. The windows were dark. "This the right address?" the driver asked, pulling to the curb. "Yes, that's my daughter's house." I fumbled for my wallet, hands clumsy with cold and medication. They must be out. Running errands, probably. The meter read $18.50. I handed him $25. Martha had always taught me to tip well. "Keep the change. You sure you'll be okay? Place looks pretty dark." "I have a key." I patted my pocket, feeling the familiar weight of metal. "Thank you for the ride." Cold air hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. The taxi pulled away, taillights disappearing around the corner. I stood alone on the empty street, small bag in hand, looking up at the house that had been my sanctuary for 2 years. All the lights were off, not just dimmed, completely dark. Even the porch light that Adeline always left burning. The windows stared back at me like closed eyes. But I had a key. I was expected. This was home. I walked slowly up the front path, each step careful on the winter-slick concrete. My key was already in my hand before I reached the door. The lock clicked with familiar ease. I'd used this key hundreds of times, coming home from doctor appointments, returning from grocery runs, letting myself in when everyone was asleep. The door swung open to unexpected silence. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the darkness. "Anyone home?" Nothing. Not even the usual sounds. No television murmuring, no children's laughter, no Adeline calling from the kitchen. I felt along the wall for the light switch, muscle memory guiding my fingers. Click. The living room blazed to life, exactly as I remembered, but somehow wrong. The furniture sat in the right places, but something felt off. My reading chair, the worn brown recliner I'd brought from Detroit, had been pushed into the corner. Where I'd left magazines on the coffee table, everything was cleared away. "Tommy? Lily?" I called louder, though the empty feeling of the house already told me the answer. I walked through the familiar layout, past the kitchen where Lily and I made pancakes on Saturday mornings, past the dining room where Tommy did homework at the big oak table. Everything looked normal, but felt hollow, like a museum display of someone else's life. My bedroom was at the end of the hall. The door stood slightly ajar, and I could see a sliver of the interior through the gap. I'd left it neat this morning, 3 days ago actually. Time had become fluid since the surgery. I pushed the door open and stopped. Suitcases sat on my bed. Old-fashioned floral luggage that definitely wasn't mine. A pair of men's work boots, size 11 or 12, stood beside the dresser. Prescription bottles crowded my nightstand, names I didn't recognize, medications I'd never taken. The room smelled wrong, like unfamiliar aftershave and someone else's soap. My family photos, Martha and me on our wedding day, Adeline's high school graduation, pictures of the grandkids, had been turned face down on the dresser, as if someone couldn't bear to look at them, or didn't want them looking back. I touched one of the suitcases with a trembling finger. The fabric was real, solid, not a hallucination brought on by medication or stress. Someone else's clothes, someone else's belongings, someone else's life had taken over my space. In the closet, my shirts hung pressed against one side, crowded by unfamiliar garments, women's dresses that weren't Adeline's, men's pants with creases sharp enough to cut. My own things looked apologetic, squeezed into whatever space remained. I sat heavily on the living room couch, the same spot where I'd watched cartoons with the kids just days ago. The house settled around me with small sounds: ticking clock, humming refrigerator, winter wind rattling windows. But no human sounds, no life. The kitchen yielded more evidence: different coffee cups in the sink, unfamiliar handwriting on grocery lists stuck to the refrigerator. The milk was a brand we never bought. Someone had been living here, sleeping in my bed, using my bathroom, sitting in my chair. But where was my family? I checked my watch. 5:45. The hospital discharge felt like hours ago, though only an hour had passed. Time moved strangely when your world tilted sideways. I tried Adeline's number again, but it went straight to voicemail. Carl's phone did the same. My chest tightened. Not the surgical pain, but something deeper. The phone call made more sense now. Find yourself a motel. She'd known. Known I wouldn't be welcome here. Known strangers were sleeping in my bed. But why? What had I done wrong? I'd helped them buy this house. I'd sold my own place, given them the money for their down payment. I'd moved in to help with the kids, to be useful, to be family. The front window showed the same empty street. No cars pulling into the driveway. No family coming home to explain, to laugh about the misunderstanding, to welcome me back. A car engine approached, growing louder. Doors slammed, multiple voices coming up the front walk. My heart hammered against my healing ribs. Footsteps on the porch, a key in the lock. I sat frozen on the couch, holding my breath, as the door swung open. My chest still tight from seeing those strangers close. I moved toward the window. Headlights swept across the front yard, familiar and warm. Two cars pulled into the driveway, Adeline's Honda and an older sedan I didn't recognize. Car doors slammed in quick succession, voices carrying on the cold air. I opened the front door with trembling hands, stepping onto the porch. The winter air hit my face like a slap, but warmth flooded through me as two small figures broke away from the group. "Grandpa!" Tommy's voice cracked with excitement. "You're home. We missed you so much." Lily ran faster despite her shorter legs, arms outstretched. "Did the doctors fix your heart? Does it still hurt?" I knelt carefully, mindful of my surgical incisions, and gathered them both in my arms. Their warmth melted something frozen inside my chest. My heart feels perfect now that I see you two. Behind them, Adeline emerged from the driver's seat, her face a mask I didn't recognize. Carl climbed out slowly from the passenger side, avoiding my eyes. From the second car came two elderly figures, a stern-faced man in work clothes and a woman clutching her purse like a weapon. "Dad," Adeline's voice cut through the children's chatter, cold as the January wind. "What are you doing here?" I stood slowly, keeping one hand on each grandchild's shoulder. "I live here, honey. They discharged me this afternoon." Carl shifted his weight, uncomfortable. We weren't expecting you tonight." The elderly couple approached, studying me with calculating eyes. The woman, Verna, I realized, Carl's mother, adjusted her coat possessively. The man beside her, Eldon, crossed his arms and frowned. "Complications," Eldon muttered under his breath to his wife. Tommy tugged at my cardigan. "Grandpa, we went to that new pizza place, the one with the arcade games. I saved you 2 quarters to play next time." Lily bounced on her toes. "And I drew you a picture of a heart. But Mommy said you might not want to see hearts right now. But I think you would because it's a happy heart with a smile." Their innocence contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from the adults. Adeline's jaw tightened as she watched me with the children. Carl checked his phone, finding something urgent in its blank screen. The Thompson parents flanked us like spectators at a sporting event, waiting for the main attraction. Porch light created harsh shadows across everyone's faces. Frost was already forming on the car windshields, and distant traffic hummed on suburban streets. Neighbors' windows glowed warmly, families settling in for cozy evenings. Here, the cold seemed to come from more than just the weather. "Grandpa's hands are shaking," Lily whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are you cold?" I wasn't cold. I was terrified. The suitcases in my bedroom, the turned-down photos, the prescription bottles, everything clicked into place as I watched these 5 adults arrange themselves around me and the children. Adeline took a deep breath, stepping forward with purpose. Keys jangled nervously in her hand as she fixed me with a look I'd never seen before. Determined, almost businesslike. "Dad, we need to talk. There have been some changes while you were gone." The same chill I felt waking up in recovery hit my spine. Adeline's words hung in the frigid air, like visible breath, and I could feel Tommy and Lily sensing the shift, their small bodies tensing beside me. "What changes?" My voice came out steadier than expected. "And whose things are in my bedroom?" Adeline glanced at Carl, who immediately found something fascinating about his shoes. She straightened her shoulders, businesslike. "Eldon and Verna needed a place to stay. Your room was available." Available? The word felt foreign in my mouth. "But I live here. This is my home, too." Verna stepped closer, her purse clutched like armor. "We're family, too. We have rights." Eldon nodded curtly. "The boy needs to understand practical arrangements." I looked at Carl, waiting for him to speak up, to defend me, to explain this was temporary. Instead, he cleared his throat, weakly. "We thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" My surgical scar began aching under the stress, a sharp reminder of my vulnerability. "That you gave away my bed while I was having heart surgery?" Tommy's head swiveled between us, confusion growing. "Why is Grandpa upset? What's wrong?" Lily tugged on Adeline's coat. "Mommy, why are you being mean to Grandpa?" Adeline ignored her daughter, keeping her eyes fixed on me. "Actually, Dad, it's not your home. Not anymore." The words hit like physical blows. My vision blurred momentarily, medication and shock combining in a dangerous cocktail. I gripped the porch railing for support. "Where exactly do you expect me to sleep?" My hands shook, not from cold now, but from rage barely contained. Adeline's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile on someone else's face. She pointed across the yard to a small wooden structure near the garage. "We set up a space for you, right there." My eyes followed her gesture to the doghouse, the tiny wooden shelter that had sat empty since they'd never gotten the pet they'd promised the children. In the harsh porch light, it looked even smaller, more pathetic than I remembered. Comprehension dawned like a physical weight settling on my chest. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was pointing to a doghouse as my new accommodations. "You're joking." The words came out as a whisper. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Adeline's voice held no warmth, no recognition of our shared history, our blood connection. "It's weatherproof. There's room for a sleeping bag." I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my chest where my heart hammered against healing ribs. The faces around me blurred, Carl's cowardly avoidance, Eldon's satisfied nod, Verna's entitled smirk. Tommy broke away from the group, running to stand beside me. "That's not fair! Grandpa can't sleep outside. He's sick." Lily began crying, her small voice cutting through the winter air. "I don't understand. Why can't Grandpa sleep in his room?" "Because," Adeline said with brutal practicality, "Eldon and Verna are paying rent. You're not." The final piece of betrayal clicked into place. Not only had they stolen my home, they were profiting from it. I thought of the $180,000 I'd given them from selling my Detroit house, money that had made their mortgage manageable, their life comfortable. Carl finally looked up from his phone. "It's just until we figure things out." "Figure what out?" My voice grew stronger, fed by rising anger. "How to house your father-in-law in a building meant for animals." The porch light flickered, casting dancing shadows across this surreal scene. Car headlights still illuminated our family drama, neighbors probably watching from behind curtained windows. The cold wind picked up, making everyone shiver except me. I felt nothing now but clarity. I straightened my shoulders, looking directly at Adeline. My daughter, The child I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. The person who now saw me as less worthy of shelter than strangers paying rent. I see. My voice came out calm, controlled. I understand perfectly now. My voice came out steadier than I expected, given that my world had just collapsed in a suburban driveway. Something shifted inside me, not breaking, but hardening into something new. I'll get my things, I said quietly, turning toward the house. Dad, you're being dramatic. Adeline's defensive tone followed me up the porch steps. It's just temporary until... Until what, Adeline? I paused at the door, not turning around. Until you need money again? Inside, I moved methodically through what had been my room. Verna's floral dresses hung where my shirts used to be. Eldon's work boots sat beside my bed, like they belonged there. I pushed aside their belongings, gathering my clothes from corners where they'd been shoved. Tommy and Lily followed me, their questions a steady stream of confusion and concern. Grandpa, where are you going? Can I come with you? I folded my shirts carefully, the way Martha had taught me 40 years ago. I have somewhere else to go, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. But you just got home. We planned to build snow forts tomorrow. Tommy's voice cracked with disappointment. In the jewelry box on my dresser, I found my wedding ring. Martha's engagement ring nestled beside it, waiting for no one. I slipped my ring back on my finger where it belonged. The weight felt familiar, comforting. A memory surfaced. Adeline at 25, crying in my kitchen after her divorce. Dad, I don't know what I'll do. The kids need stability. I'd held her then, promised her everything would work out. When Carl came along, I'd welcomed him like a son. When they wanted to buy this house, I'd sold mine without hesitation. The children need their grandfather, she'd said then. We need you here, Dad. I found my family photos turned face down in the dresser drawer. Tommy's school picture, Lily's ballet recital, Adeline's wedding day, all hidden away like embarrassing secrets. I tucked them into my suitcase. From the living room came Adeline's voice, explaining to the children, Grandpa needs to stay somewhere else for a while. It's complicated. Carl's weaker voice, he'll visit on weekends. Eldon, practical as always. The arrangement works better for everyone. I put on my heaviest coat, preparing for the journey ahead. The small suitcase held everything that truly mattered. Photos, a few changes of clothes, my father's watch. Everything else was just objects. In the living room, I dialed the taxi company with steady fingers. I need a ride to Michigan. Yes, I can pay for the distance. Adeline looked up sharply. Michigan? Dad, what's in Michigan? I didn't answer. Behind her, Carl and his parents exchanged glances. None of them had imagined I might have somewhere to go, resources they didn't know about. They'd assumed I was helpless, dependent, with no options beyond their grudging charity. Headlights appeared in the driveway 20 minutes later. The taxi driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, helped me with my suitcase. I knelt one final time to hug my grandchildren. Will you call us? Lily whispered against my ear. Every day, I promised, meaning it. Tommy hugged me fiercely. I love you, Grandpa. I don't understand why you have to go. Sometimes adults make decisions that hurt people they love, I told him honestly, but that doesn't mean the love disappears. Adeline stood frozen on the porch, watching. For a moment her mask slipped. I saw a flicker of something. Doubt, maybe guilt. But then Verna stepped beside her, possessive and satisfied, and the moment passed. The taxi pulled away into the winter night. Through the rear window, I watched my grandchildren waving until the house disappeared behind bare trees. Relief mixed with devastation in my chest, creating something I'd never felt before, the strange freedom of having nothing left to lose. Where to exactly in Michigan? The driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I gave her the address I'd memorized from old letters, though I'd never been there myself. Olson Manor, New Buffalo. The taxi driver had been quiet for the last hour, sensing something significant in this late-night destination. Snow crunched under the tires as we turned onto a long, winding driveway I hadn't seen in 5 years. Through the windshield, headlights illuminated towering oak trees, laden with winter snow, their branches creating a cathedral arch over our approach. This is some place, the driver murmured as the house came into view. Olson Manor rose from the darkness like something from another era. 3 stories of weathered stone and tall windows, with a wraparound porch that I remembered running across as a child. Uncle Harlan's domain, eccentric, imposing, and completely unexpected by anyone who'd written him off as the family oddball. I paid the fare and stood alone in the snow, suitcase in hand, looking up at what I'd inherited without knowing it. The cold bit through my coat, but I felt warmer than I had in months. This wasn't charity or someone else's grudging hospitality. This was mine. Uncle Harlan's voice echoed in my memory. "Third stone from the left post, Burl. Count carefully." I found the hiding spot exactly where he'd described, my numb fingers closing around the old brass key. Even from beyond, he was taking care of me. The front door opened with a satisfying weight. Solid oak, built to last generations. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and old leather, memories preserved in wood and fabric. I found the electrical panel by memory and flipped the main switches. Light flooded the foyer, revealing the crystal chandelier I'd gazed up at as a boy, dusty but intact. Each room held treasures I'd forgotten. The library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and the massive stone fireplace where Harlan used to read me adventure stories. The kitchen with its vintage 1950s appliances still gleaming chrome and mint green. Through the tall windows, frozen Lake Michigan stretched endlessly under moonlight. I climbed the grand staircase slowly, testing each step. My chest ached from the surgery, but differently now, not with pain, but with expanding possibility. The master bedroom overlooked the lake, its four-poster bed made up with fresh linens. Someone had been maintaining this place, keeping it ready. On the mahogany desk sat a manila envelope marked in Harlan's careful handwriting. For Burl, open when family disappoints you. My hands shook as I picked it up. Uncle Harlan, dead 5 years, had somehow known this day would come, had predicted that the people I'd trusted most would prove themselves unworthy of that trust, had prepared a sanctuary for when I needed it most. The envelope felt substantial, multiple pages inside, letters, documents, instructions I was meant to find at exactly this moment. Everything Harlan had never told me, waiting for when I was ready to hear it. I sat heavily in his leather chair, letter opener in hand, and realized I wasn't the powerless, homeless old man my family had discarded. I was Burl Olson, rightful heir to 80 years of family history, sitting in my own mansion with resources they'd never imagined. Tomorrow, I would read whatever wisdom Uncle Harlan had left behind. Tonight, I would sleep in my own bed, in my own house, for the first time in 2 years. Sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows reminded me this wasn't a dream. The lake sparkled beyond frost-etched glass, and somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed across the Michigan countryside. Uncle Harlan's letter lay unopened on the nightstand. I wanted to savor this moment, before learning what he'd known about my future. The letter revealed itself slowly over morning coffee. Harlan's voice came through clearly in his measured handwriting. "I knew this day would come, Burl. Family often mistakes kindness for weakness." Each sentence felt like permission I'd been waiting years to receive. "This house has been in our family for 80 years. It's yours by right and by heart. Don't let them guilt you. You've given enough." Day by day, the manor came alive under my care. I dusted furniture with slow, careful movements, mindful of my healing chest. The hardware store owner in town recognized me immediately. "You must be Harlan's nephew. He talked about you constantly." The grocery clerk smiled warmly. "Welcome back to New Buffalo. Staying long this time." By the third day, I'd established a routine that felt more natural than anything in recent memory. Morning coffee, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan gold and pink. Light household tasks paced for recovery. Afternoon reading in Uncle Harlan's library, surrounded by books he'd collected over decades. Mrs. Peterson from next door brought homemade soup. "It's good to see life in that house again. Your uncle was the finest man I ever knew." Her words carried weight. This community had loved Harlan, and by extension welcomed me home. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Adeline's number, messages I deleted without reading. For the first time in years, nobody needed anything from me. No grandchildren to babysit, no dishes to wash, no guilt about being underfoot, just peaceful silence and the freedom to heal. The diner waitress, Sarah, according to her name tag, remembered me from childhood visits, Your uncle always said you'd end up here eventually. Said you had his sense of what really mattered. She refilled my coffee without being asked, the kind of genuine service that comes from community connection. Each day brought small improvements. My appetite returned with home cooking in my own kitchen. Sleep came easier in the comfortable bed that belonged to me. Energy levels built as stress melted away. Most importantly, confidence in my own worth slowly returned. For the first time in years, I wrote in the journal I'd started keeping, nobody needs anything from me except what I choose to give. Uncle Harlan's final wisdom became clearer with each passing day. The townfolk will welcome you. They remember me fondly, and they'll see me in you. He'd been right about everything, the family betrayal, my need for sanctuary, even the healing power of belonging somewhere by choice rather than obligation. By week's end, I'd settled into a rhythm that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Morning walks along the lake shore despite the cold, afternoon projects around the house, nothing too strenuous, evening fires in the library, reading books I'd never had time for. The reflection in the hall mirror showed a different man than the one who'd left Chicago. Stronger, calmer, with the bearing of someone who owned where he stood. Not the displaced guest I'd become in my daughter's house, but the master of my own domain. Car tires crunched on gravel outside, breaking my peaceful morning routine. Through the window, I watched a familiar Honda pull up the long driveway, followed by a second car I didn't recognize. 4 weeks of quiet mornings ended with the sound of that engine. I watched from the library window as Adeline stepped out of her car, anger radiating from every movement. Carl emerged more cautiously, his eyes already calculating as they swept across the manor's impressive facade. I opened the front door before they could knock. My house, my rules, my position of power. "How could you hide this from us?" Adeline's voice cracked with fury and something that might have been panic. "We're your family." "The same way you hid your plans to throw me out like garbage," I replied calmly, not moving from the doorway. Carl stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the crystal chandelier visible behind me. "Do you know what this place is worth? We could have helped you manage." "Manage it into your bank account, you mean?" I watched his face flush at the accuracy of my guess. They pushed past me into the foyer, Adeline spinning to face me with desperate eyes. "We gave you a home for 2 years. You gave me a corner of my own money. I paid for that house." The words came out steady, matter of fact. No anger, just truth. For the first time in our relationship, Adeline looked uncertain. The manipulation tactics that had worked for decades met a wall they couldn't penetrate. I wasn't the desperate, dependent father she'd grown used to controlling. "Dad, you're being unreasonable. We're family. Families share." "Families protect each other," I interrupted. "They don't point to doghouses when their relatives need shelter." Carl wandered through the rooms like an appraiser, touching furniture, examining artwork. "This place has to be worth over $1 million. Think what we could do with that kind of money. The kids' college funds. The kids you used as excuses to manipulate me for years." I followed him into the living room, watching him calculate square footage and property values. "Funny how their welfare only matters when it serves your purposes." Adeline tried tears next, the weapon that had worked so often before. "I made one mistake, Dad. One bad day when I was overwhelmed. You're throwing away our entire relationship over—" "One bad day?" My voice remained calm, but something steel-hard entered it. "You planned this. You moved them into my room while I was having surgery. You pointed to a doghouse like I was less than human. That wasn't a mistake. That was who you really are." The family portraits on the walls seemed to watch our confrontation. Generations of Olsons who'd worked and sacrificed to build something lasting. Uncle Harlan's wisdom surrounded me in leather-bound books and carefully chosen furniture. This wasn't just my house. It was my heritage, my rightful place. "We need this," Carl said bluntly, abandoning any pretense of sentiment. "Our situation, it's worse than you know. We could lose everything." "Then you should have thought of that before you lost me." The simplicity of it seemed to stun them both. No negotiation, no complex explanations, just consequences following naturally from choices. They'd gambled with my loyalty and lost. Now they stood in my house, reduced to begging from the man they'd tried to discard. Adeline made one final attempt, grasping my arm with trembling fingers. The children miss you. They ask about you every day. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Tommy and Lily, innocent victims of their parents' greed and cruelty, but they would be better served by learning that actions have consequences than by watching their grandfather enable their parents' behavior indefinitely. Then bring them to visit, I said quietly. They're welcome here any time. You're not. The distinction hit like a physical blow. Adeline's face crumpled, genuine emotion finally breaking through the manipulation. Carl's shoulders sagged as he realized the money he'd been counting was forever beyond his reach. "This is our inheritance, too," Adeline whispered desperately. "No," I said, walking to the door and opening it wide. "Your inheritance was my love, my help, my presence in your lives. You threw it away. This is mine." They left without another word, understanding finally that the powerless old man they'd discarded no longer existed. I closed the door firmly and walked to my library, settling into Uncle Harlan's chair. Time to call my lawyer about updating my will. 3 months of quiet mornings had restored more than my health. They'd returned my sense of worth. The afternoon sun streamed through the library windows, painting golden rectangles across the Persian rug Uncle Harlan had brought back from his travels. I was deep in a biography of Theodore Roosevelt when the phone's harsh ring shattered the peaceful silence. Adeline glowed on the caller ID. I stared at it for 3 rings, 4, 5. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail like all the others, but something in the persistence made me hesitate. "Hello?" My voice came out neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. "Dad, please don't hang up." Adeline's voice cracked with panic I'd never heard before. "I know you hate me, but—" "I don't hate you, Adeline. I'm just not your solution anymore." A sob escaped her throat. "The bank is taking the house. We have nowhere to go." I set down my book, Uncle Harlan's leather chair creaking as I leaned back. Through the window, Lake Michigan sparkled peacefully under spring sunshine. "And where are your precious in-laws now?" "They left." Her voice broke completely. "Packed up and drove away the minute they heard about the foreclosure. Didn't even say goodbye to the kids." The irony wasn't lost on me. Eldon and Verna, who'd taken my room with such entitled satisfaction, had abandoned ship the moment their comfortable arrangement became inconvenient. Uncle Harlan's warnings about fair-weather family echoed in my memory. "Carl lost his job in March," Adeline continued, desperation making her words tumble together. "We've missed 3 mortgage payments. The utilities are being shut off tomorrow. Dad, I'm scared." I remained silent, letting her fill the space with increasingly frantic explanations. Credit cards maxed out, savings depleted, friends avoiding their calls. The complete financial collapse that follows when people live beyond their means and lose their primary income. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "A terrible, awful mistake. But we're family. Doesn't that count for anything?" "Family protects each other," I said quietly. "You pointed to a doghouse." I was stressed, overwhelmed. "You know how Carl gets when—" "I know exactly how Carl gets. And I know how you get when you want something." My voice remained calm, but steel ran underneath it. "The question is, what do you want from me now?" Through the phone, I could hear her crying, real tears, not the manipulative kind she'd used so effectively before. The sound stirred something in my chest, but not sympathy. Justice, the natural consequences of choices finally coming home to roost. "Help us," she begged. "Please, I'll do anything. Sign papers, give you legal guardianship, whatever you want. Just help us." "And Tommy and Lily? Where are they during this crisis?" "At school. They don't know yet. We haven't told them we might lose the house." Her voice grew smaller. "Dad, I'm scared. Not for me. For Tommy and Lily. They don't understand why we might lose our home." The mention of my grandchildren created a long pause that stretched between us like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. I could hear Adeline's ragged breathing, the sound of someone drowning who'd finally stopped trying to swim. "Tommy and Lily can come stay with me," I said finally. "Indefinitely. What about Carl and me? We're their parents. You're also the people who tried to make me live in a doghouse." I kept my voice level, factual. "Actions have consequences, Adeline. Yours and mine." "That was a mistake, Dad. We were stressed. We didn't think—" "You were calculating. There's a difference." I stood and walked to the window, watching a pair of cardinals build their nest in the oak tree. You planned my exile while I was having surgery. You arranged for strangers to take my room. You pointed to an animal shelter as my new accommodations. That wasn't stress talking. That was who you really are. Silence stretched between us. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. What are you saying? I'm saying the children are welcome here. You and Carl need to figure out your own solutions. But we're a family. You can't separate us. You separated yourselves from me easily enough. I traced patterns on the frost-etched window with my finger. The manor has plenty of room for Tommy and Lily. Good schools nearby, safe neighborhood, stable environment. Everything children need to thrive. And us? Carl's voice came from somewhere in the background. Apparently he'd been listening all along. Find jobs, rebuild your lives, learn to stand on your own. I paused, considering my next words carefully. The children can visit you on weekends, assuming you have somewhere stable for them to visit. Adeline's breathing grew more ragged. You're punishing us. I'm protecting them. From chaos. From uncertainty. From adults who make children pay for their poor decisions. The cardinals had found the perfect spot for their nest, protected high enough to be safe, with a clear view of potential threats. You'll always be their parents, but parenting is about providing stability, not just biology. We can change, she whispered desperately. We can be better. Then prove it. Get jobs. Find a place to live. Show them what responsibility looks like instead of just talking about it. Through the phone, I could hear her trying to stifle sobs. Part of me, the part that remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle, reading her bedtime stories, walking her down the aisle, wanted to relent. But Uncle Harlan's wisdom held me steady. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. What about school? Their friends? Their whole lives are here. New Buffalo has excellent schools. The children will make new friends, and they'll have a grandfather who puts their welfare first instead of using them as pawns in adult games. She started, then stopped. We both knew she had. The offer stands, I said firmly. Tommy and Lily are welcome here immediately. You and Carl can visit once you've proven you can provide them with a stable environment to return to. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was hollow with defeat. How long? However long it takes for you to become the parents they deserve instead of the ones you've been. I could hear her sobbing openly now, the sound of someone finally understanding that their actions had permanent consequences. No amount of tears or manipulation would undo the doghouse moment. No promises of future behavior could erase the cruelty she'd shown when she thought I was powerless. Fine. The word came out broken, barely recognizable. Yes, whatever you want. Just take care of them. 3 weeks had transformed the manor from quiet sanctuary to joyful family home. The sound of children's laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent too long felt like exactly what Uncle Harlan would have wanted. I stood at the kitchen window, watching Tommy help me tend the vegetable garden we'd planted together, while Lily painted pictures of cardinals at the patio table. "Grandpa, the tomatoes are growing," Tommy called out, his voice bright with discovery. The boy had shot up 2 inches since arriving, good food and reduced stress working their magic. "That's because you're taking such good care of them," I called back, cracking eggs for their Saturday morning pancakes. The routine had become precious to me. Breakfast together, chores divided fairly, afternoon adventures around the property, evening stories by the fireplace. The transformation in both children had been remarkable. Tommy's teacher at the local school reported significant improvement in his grades and attitude. Lily's nightmares about losing the house had stopped after the first week in her cheerfully decorated room overlooking the lake. Car tires on gravel announced the weekend visitors. Through the window, I watched Adeline and Carl climb out of a battered Honda Civic. Their transportation had been downgraded along with everything else. Both looked thinner, worn down by 3 weeks of minimum wage jobs and a cramped apartment in a less desirable Chicago neighborhood. "Mom!" Lily dropped her paintbrush and ran toward the driveway, Tommy close behind. The reunion was always emotional, love complicated by confusion, loyalty divided between parents and the grandfather who'd become their protector. I opened the front door before they reached it, maintaining the boundaries I'd established. Adeline, Carl, how was the drive? Fine, thank you. Adeline's voice carried new humility. The designer clothes had been replaced by thrift store finds, the manicured nails by hands rough from restaurant work. The children looked wonderful. They did. Tanned from outdoor time, confident from stability, growing strong in the security the manor provided. Both had adapted to country life with the resilience children possessed when freed from adult anxiety. Mom, wait until you see my room. Lily grabbed Adeline's hand, pulling her toward the staircase. Grandpa let me pick out everything. And I'm learning to fix the fence, Tommy added proudly. Grandpa's teaching me to use real tools. I watched the family reunion from a careful distance, present but separate. The children needed their parents' love, but they also needed to understand that actions had lasting consequences. The weekly visits served both purposes, maintaining family bonds while reinforcing the security of their new living situation. Dad, Adeline approached me hesitantly after the children had dragged Carl off to see their latest projects. I want you to know we're trying, really trying. I can see that, and I could. The arrogance had been replaced by genuine humility. The entitled demands had given way to grateful acceptance. How are the jobs working out? Exhausting, humbling, she managed a weak smile. But honest. We're learning what it means to actually earn our living instead of depending on... She gestured helplessly around the manor's grand interior. Instead of depending on family members you were willing to discard, I finished quietly. Her face flushed, but she nodded. Yes, that. The afternoon passed peacefully. Carl helped Tommy with a birdhouse project, while Adeline assisted Lily with her painting. I observed from my reading chair, Uncle Harlan's books surrounding me like wisdom made tangible. This was how family should work. Everyone contributing, everyone valued, everyone protected. When evening came and they prepared to leave, both children hugged their parents tightly but showed no inclination to pack bags and follow. Security had become more important than sentiment. We'll see you next weekend, Adeline promised, her voice carefully controlled. Drive safely, I replied, meaning it. After their taillights disappeared down the drive, I found both children in the library. Tommy was reading adventure stories while Lily worked on a jigsaw puzzle featuring cardinals. The fire crackled peacefully in the stone hearth, and Lake Michigan stretched endlessly beyond the tall windows. Grandpa? Lily looked up from her puzzle. Are Mom and Dad going to be okay? They're learning important lessons, I told her honestly. Sometimes people have to lose things they thought they couldn't live without to discover what really matters. Tommy closed his book and looked at me seriously. Like how you learned you didn't need to live in someone else's house to be happy. The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze me. Exactly like that. Later, after tucking them into their beds in rooms that were truly theirs, I sat in Uncle Harlan's chair and opened his journal to the final entry I'd discovered the week before. The greatest gift we can give children is not shelter from life's storms, but the strength to weather them with dignity. Burl will understand this someday. He'd been right about everything. Family wasn't just blood. It was choice, commitment, and protection of those who couldn't protect themselves. Justice wasn't revenge. It was allowing consequences to teach lessons that words couldn't convey. Outside, spring rain began pattering against the windows. Inside, 2 children slept peacefully in their own beds, in their own home, protected by a grandfather who'd learned the difference between kindness and weakness. The manor felt complete. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.